Story 1. My biggest mistake in high school was agreeing to take an AP physics class with the seniors. I was a rising sophomore at the time, so when I walked into a class with kids much older than I was, my teacher sat me next to the only other person there that was close to my age. He was a freshman and his name was Josh. Josh was one of those people who gave off weird vibes. He had a sloppily shaven head, empty eyes, and ate warm Skittles in class. He was short but mean-looking, and the instant I sat down next to him, my teacher ordered us to exchange numbers and tried to make us start talking. For some reason, I really did not want to talk to him. I wasn't trying to be an asshole, but he just scared me. Sitting next to him felt like what I can only describe as sitting next to a hungry dog while you're holding a piece of chicken. It felt like any second he would jump on me, even though he was a good 6 inches shorter than me. It really freaked me out that he had my phone number and name. Even though I didn't know the kid, I had a feeling that him knowing literally anything about me was not good. Luckily, he didn't talk to me for over a week, and after some time I thought I was just being overly judgmental and he was just a socially awkward kid. One day, about 3 weeks after I started the class with him, he talked to me. He asked something like, "You're the girl that drives the F-150, right?" And reluctantly I said, "Yeah." He then told me that cars were a hobby of his and he had seen me driving and liked my truck. Although I was caught a bit off guard, he seemed innocent and nice, and we kind of became friends after that. He started texting me a lot after school, asking me a bit about myself and sharing a bit about himself too. Like I said, the kid seemed innocent, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I shouldn't be telling him anything about myself and I should not be talking to him. The average conversation continued for a month or so until one day when I came home from work. I worked at a restaurant about 20 minutes away from my house. So when I turned off my phone to drive to work, I honestly wouldn't turn it back on until I drove back home, as phones were prohibited at the restaurant. One weekend I came home at 12 a.m. after doing the closing shift and he sent me several odd texts. They all consisted of "I love you" and "I want to take you to homecoming and be my girlfriend." They all rubbed me the wrong way. He didn't seem to really be asking as much as he was demanding me to have a relationship with him that I wasn't comfortable with. I ultimately friend-zoned him and told him I was going to bed. His response was no. Just no. It freaked me the F out and made me really not want to go to class on Monday, but I had no choice. I had to go. He didn't text me for the rest of the weekend, and when I sulked into class on Monday, he gave me the same hungry dog stare from day one, and I ignored him the whole class. I practically ran when the bell rang, and when I got to my car in the student parking lot, I saw him watch me drive away from the sidewalk. It freaked me out more than I'd like to admit, so I called one of my guy friends and asked him if I could drive him home from school so I'd feel safer until creepy Josh would be less creepy. He agreed and we made an arrangement there and then. A lot of people thought I was overreacting, but I just knew in my gut that I needed someone in the car with me, and this guy friend seemed like the right one. When I came home from work at 10ish Monday night, I opened my phone and saw more texts from Josh. This time they were much more predatory than the night before, as that night they were detailing how he would like me to perform sexual acts on him. I foolishly allowed this to happen for another couple of weeks, still feeling uncomfortable in class when it finally hit a breaking point. Josh started sending me texts about how, if I wouldn't love him, he had to die. At that point, I decided it was time to involve the dean, but she did virtually nothing. She basically explained that Josh was special needs and to cut him some slack, despite the predatory tone of the messages. She told me she would talk to him about it, but to not be worried because he likely wouldn't do anything. I was infuriated and told my dad, who told his army of Italian brothers who all decided to keep an eye on him. The creepy messages didn't get any worse, and eventually they stopped after I blocked his number. That was when the really creepy stuff started. The cameras outside our house kept picking up a person at night. Someone very similar looking to Josh. This person kept knocking on the windows and looking in my car, so my dad called the cops, who were actually awesome, and kept a lookout on my house for a while to deter the nightly visits. With a cop outside at night, the visits stopped and my work started getting calls from Josh asking when I was working. My manager ended up alerting security, who threatened him to stop calling. Then Josh decided to start frequenting the restaurant where I worked every day and leave paper cranes on the table saying, "I love you," and "Your new boyfriend isn't good for you, I am." He started following me to class, to my car, to work, even though I pretended he wasn't there and was still driving my 6'3" guy friend home. I refused to leave my house without a group of people and debated skipping prom and becoming a hermit because he made me feel so unsafe anywhere. Eventually, my dad decided a restraining order would be a good idea, and I did get one granted so he couldn't walk near me or contact me for 5 years. Thankfully, this finally caused the year-long nightmare to stop. I didn't see Josh again until my senior year when I was walking down the hall with my friends, and he saw me coming, stopped in his tracks, and slowly watched me walk past him with that same hungry dog look that initially scared me the day I met him. You're probably wondering why he never got in any trouble when I contacted the dean and the police. Well, Where I live, there's a bunch of laws that make it exponentially harder for someone with special needs to be punished for creepy behavior, even though they're just as capable to execute their behavior than the average person. The last time I saw Josh was at graduation, when I could have sworn he was in one of the front rows waiting for me to get my diploma, although it's possible he was there for someone else. A part of me knows he was there for me. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that this can happen to anyone. I never thought this would happen to me until it did, and it robbed me of my safety, high school experience, and peace of mind. Always trust your instincts on someone. You are not required to be nice to anyone who makes you uncomfortable. That leads me to now. I'm happy. I'm in a serious relationship with an awesome guy, and in a weird way, I'm glad I was able to learn from this whole experience. Story 2. This goes back to when I was 15 and a sophomore in high school. I only had a few friends and would walk by myself to and from most of my classes because small talk made, and still does, me nervous, thanks to some anxiety issues. I was walking to class one day and this guy came out of nowhere and started walking next to me. He was a bit too close for comfort, so I moved over, but he followed. He was so close to me, his arm was brushing against my shoulder. For context, I'm 5'1" and 93 pounds, and this guy was at least 6'2" and 180 pounds, and probably a year or two older. I'd had some bad experiences with strange men in the past, so I was getting pretty uneasy. He finally decided to introduce himself. "Hey, you're Miss Wiggly, right?" Of course I was taken aback, since I had no clue who this dude was and had never seen him before. "Do I know you?" I asked. What he said next gave me chills and still creeps me out to this day. "No, but I know you." Just like that, he turned and walked away. I kid you not, he actually said that. I saw him the next morning when I was sitting with my friends and waiting for the first bell to ring. I pointed him out to them and asked who he was. They didn't know him either. The bell rang, and we all went our separate ways. I stuck my headphones in my ears and turned on some music for the first period. I felt an arm brushing against my shoulder. I looked out of the corner of my eye and saw him there, staring down at me with this weird grin. I moved away from him, and just like before, he moved right with me. He pulled my headphones off and started asking me for my number. When I told him no, he started begging like he was trying to be cute. "Please, can I have your number? You're so pretty. I just want to be able to call you." I said nothing. Then he started asking me if I had a boyfriend and if that was why I wouldn't talk to him. I got to my class and hurried in, and he stood by the door staring and grinning for a few seconds before he left. This went on for several weeks. He started turning up everywhere I went. I would even take detours to try and throw him off, but he would eventually pick up on those too. Every day he would ask if I had a boyfriend and if I would just give him my phone number. After telling him no multiple times, I eventually gave up and just started giving him the cold shoulder. One afternoon, I was walking to the bus parking lot to catch my ride home. Suddenly, my headphones were tugged out of my ears, and lo and behold, there's him. "You never gave me your number," he whined. I put my earbuds back in only to have them yanked out again. "Why won't you just give me your number? Come on, haven't I been nice to you?" I hopped on my bus and thanked the gods that he didn't follow. That night, I got a text message from an unknown number. "Hey." I ask who it is, and soon after get the reply, "Are you a virgin?" Now I'm sitting here thinking, how the hell did he get my cell number? I did have a Facebook and a MySpace account, but neither one of them had my email or phone number visible to anyone but my friends. The next morning, I called the phone company and asked them to block his number so he couldn't contact me. The next day, I was walking between the two buildings of the high school on my way to a midday class, and he showed up again. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Why won't you message me back?" I told him I couldn't talk because I was going to be late for class and walked faster. He caught up and raised his voice a bit. "Why won't you answer my calls? I want you to be my girlfriend." I ignored him, and I guess he was tired of that because then he got really angry. He ran up behind me and grabbed the handle on my backpack and the hood of my jacket with the same hand and yanked me backwards. I reached forward and grabbed the handle of the heavy metal door of the next building. I was screaming at him at this point. "Let me go, just leave me alone." He was still trying to pull me behind the building, and I was about to lose my grip on the door handle when I guess he realized that I'd created a scene. He let go and nervously said something along the lines of he was just playing and to stop being so serious. After that, he would try to message me on Facebook once in a while, but I blocked him there too. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since. Story 3. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved 7 or so times and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close group of friends in middle school, and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those close friends. They were in a band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavy-set, and originally kind of intimidating, although I was never afraid of large men before him. Lesson learned. I had a kind of bad home life, and I spent as much time as I could at school, sometimes hanging around the school campus until 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. Three of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home and something horrible happened. He left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and exchanged numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression and self-harm, and I just wanted to help. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating someone, and when I turned him down, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends, we still hung out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later I saw that he changed directions and had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me and passing at a distance. I started to minimize the group time we spend together, and he would follow me more. I had friends meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe. He knew where I lived. Then he started to talk, not to me but to mutual friends, about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home with. At first she just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. Then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes, and every time he rambled about her she became more and more like me. And then he said what happened. Over literal weeks this fantasy evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, my birthday. And she died horribly and he couldn't react in time. She bled out in his arms. Sarah, who has brown curly hair, blue eyes, my name, my birthday, and sounds just like me, bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail. And this guy with his sick fantasy about my death would follow me around and knew where I lived. My boyfriend was abusive, mentally and physically, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could, because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school he had a breakdown, freaked out, and ran out of the school in a panic. I was sent after him and I found him curled up on the floor. I got closer. I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added details. We had been walking home from a concert in California. We passed a dark alley and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me and he thought I was calling the cops. He stabbed me. Once, twice, again and again, and Sam stood there horrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near my body and attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me he killed someone. My stalker killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first. That morning we went and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he admitted to murder, and that was the reason they moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults and gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friend walking me in between classes, hiding behind my abusive boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now, and I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries recording the events and my growing panic, and the similar stories from my friend group. Story 4. Starting my junior year at Lincoln High School in Los Angeles was supposed to be exciting. I had my friends, my favorite teachers, and a pretty decent schedule. But it all changed when a new student, Alex, joined our school. At first, Alex seemed quiet and shy, always keeping to himself. It started with small things. I'd notice Alex staring at me from across the room or catching glimpses of him following me in the hallways. I shrugged it off as paranoia. But then one day I found a note in my locker. It was unsigned but clearly directed at me, talking about how they knew everything about me and my routine. Things got creepier. I'd see Alex standing outside my classes waiting for me. He never spoke, just watched. My friends began to notice and teased me about having a secret admirer, but I didn't find it funny. I felt like I was being watched constantly. One evening after school, I stayed late for a club meeting. Walking to my car, I saw Alex standing by the entrance. My heart raced as I quickened my pace. He started walking towards me and I panicked, dropping my books. He picked them up and handed them to me without saying a word. The silence was deafening. The next day I told my best friend Jessica about Alex. She agreed that his behavior was odd and suggested we tell a teacher. We reported it to Mr. Johnson, the school counselor. He promised to look into it, but I could tell he didn't take it seriously. He thought Alex was just a shy kid trying to make friends. Things took a darker turn. I started receiving anonymous texts from a number I didn't recognize. The messages were unsettling, detailing my whereabouts and actions. I was terrified. I knew it was Alex. I blocked the number, but the messages continued from different numbers. One night I was home alone when I heard a noise outside my window. My heart pounded as I peeked through the blinds. There in the shadows stood Alex, staring up at my window. I screamed and called the police. By the time they arrived, Alex was gone. But I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. With my parents' help, we went to the police and reported Alex's behavior. They took it seriously and started an investigation. The school was notified and Alex was suspended pending the investigation. It turned out he had been stalking me for months and his behavior had been escalating. The police issued a restraining order against Alex and he was removed from Lincoln High School. I finally felt a sense of relief, though the experience left me shaken. I was grateful for the support of my family and friends. It took time, but I eventually felt safe again. Story 5. Jefferson High School was just like any other high school in Chicago. I was a sophomore and everything was pretty normal until the strange things started happening in the girls' locker room. It all began with the disappearance of small items: hair ties, lip gloss, gym socks. We all thought it was just someone being forgetful. The missing items became more frequent and more personal. My friend Lisa lost her favorite necklace and another girl, Maria, couldn't find her phone. It was getting out of hand, but no one knew who was behind it. We reported it to the gym teacher, Mrs. Martinez, but she couldn't find any leads. One day while changing after gym class, I noticed something odd. There was a small, barely noticeable hole in the ceiling tile. At first I thought it was just wear and tear, but something about it seemed off. I mentioned it to Lisa and we decided to take a closer look. We used a broom to move the tile, and to our horror, we found a hidden camera. It was aimed directly at the locker room. We were shocked and scared. Who would do something like this? We immediately reported it to Mrs. Martinez, who called the principal. The school launched an investigation. The camera was removed and the police were called in. They started questioning everyone, including the janitorial staff and teachers. Rumors spread like wildfire and everyone was on edge. The investigation pointed towards Mr. Reeves, the school's IT technician. He had access to the security systems and was often seen around the locker rooms claiming to be fixing things. The police found evidence on his computer linking him to the hidden camera. Mr. Reeves was arrested and charged with invasion of privacy and other related crimes. The school held an assembly to address the situation and assure students and parents that measures were being taken to improve security. The incident left us all feeling vulnerable and violated. Counseling was offered to anyone who needed it, and I took advantage of it. Talking about what happened helped me process the fear and anger I felt. The school installed new security measures, including better surveillance and stricter access to sensitive areas. Life slowly returned to normal, but the incident left a lasting impression on all of us. We became more cautious and aware of our surroundings. Story 6. Roosevelt High School in Seattle was a pretty laid-back place. I was a senior looking forward to graduation. Everything was going smoothly until the school hired a new custodian, Mr. Harris. At first, he seemed like a regular guy, but then things started to get weird. Mr. Harris would show up in places where he wasn't supposed to be. I'd see him in the girls' bathroom, claiming he was fixing something, or in the locker rooms after hours. He'd make odd comments to the girls, and his presence made everyone uncomfortable. My friends and I talked about Mr. Harris and his strange behavior. We decided to keep an eye on him and avoid being alone in isolated areas of the school. One day I caught him staring at me in the hallway. It sent chills down my spine. I told my friend Sarah about the incident, and she mentioned that she'd had similar experiences. We decided to report Mr. Harris to the principal, Mr. Thompson. He assured us he would look into it, but days went by with no changes. Mr. Harris's behavior escalated. He started leaving creepy notes in my locker and following me around the school. I felt trapped and scared. My parents called the school demanding action, but nothing seemed to happen. My friends and I decided to gather evidence. We set up our phones to record his behavior and kept detailed notes of every encounter. It was risky, but we felt we had no other choice. One afternoon, I found Mr. Harris waiting for me in the empty hallway after school. He cornered me and I felt a surge of panic. Just then, Sarah and our friends arrived, confronting him and recording everything. We threatened to call the police if he didn't leave me alone. With our collected evidence, we went to the police. They took our claims seriously and launched an investigation. Mr. Harris was arrested and charged with harassment and stalking. The school held meetings to address the situation and ensure the safety of all students. New policies were put in place and a more thorough background check was implemented for future hires. Counseling was offered to those affected. Mr. Harris's arrest brought a sense of relief, but it took time to feel safe again. My friends and I learned the importance of standing up for ourselves and the power of solidarity. We finished our senior year stronger and more aware, ready to take on the world beyond Roosevelt High School. Story 7. Central High School in Austin was my second home. I was a junior, busy with classes and extracurriculars. One night I received a strange text from an unknown number. It was late and the message said, "I'm watching you." I thought it was a prank and ignored it. The text didn't stop. Every night I received similar messages, getting more detailed about my daily activities. I started to get scared and told my best friend Emma. She suggested we try to trace the number, but it was blocked. I began noticing someone following me around school. It was subtle at first, but then it became more obvious. I'd see a shadowy figure in the parking lot, or someone lurking around corners. I was terrified and started avoiding being alone. Emma and I reported the texts and stalking to the school counselor, Ms. Davis. She took it seriously and informed the principal, who then called my parents. The school increased security, but there were no leads on who was behind the texts. The stalker's behavior escalated. I found a threatening note in my locker, and the texts became more aggressive. One night I saw a figure standing outside my bedroom window. I screamed, and the figure ran away before my parents could see them. Emma and I decided to gather evidence ourselves. We installed a security camera outside my house and kept detailed records of the texts and encounters. We were determined to catch the stalker. One night, the security camera captured footage of a hooded figure outside my window. We took the footage to the police, who were able to enhance the video and identify the stalker as a senior from our school named Chris. He had a history of troubling behavior. The police arrested Chris and charged him with stalking and harassment. He confessed to sending the texts and following me, claiming he was infatuated and wanted my attention. It was a relief to have him caught, but the ordeal left me shaken. The school provided counseling and support for me and my family. Chris was expelled and faced legal consequences. It took time, but I slowly began to feel safe again, with the support of my friends, family, and the school community. Story 8. Valley High School in Denver was known for its excellent teachers. Mr. Anderson, the chemistry teacher, was popular among students. I was a senior and he was one of my favorite teachers. He was always engaging and seemed genuinely interested in his students' success. One day I noticed Mr. Anderson acting strangely. He was more distracted than usual and seemed anxious. He often left the classroom abruptly, which was unusual for him. I shrugged it off, thinking he might be dealing with personal issues. I was working on a chemistry project after school when I accidentally knocked over a pile of papers on Mr. Anderson's desk. Among the papers, I found a small notebook filled with names and addresses. It looked suspicious, but I put it back and didn't think much of it. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Mr. Anderson meeting with unfamiliar people outside of school. They didn't look like parents or staff, and the meeting seemed secretive. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow him one day after school. I trailed Mr. Anderson to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. He went inside and I couldn't see what was happening. My heart raced as I realized this was more serious than I had thought. I took pictures of the warehouse and the people he was meeting with. I shared my findings with my best friend, Mike. We decided to report it to the principal, Mr. Turner. He took our concern seriously and contacted the police. An investigation was launched and the school was on high alert. The police uncovered that Mr. Anderson was involved in illegal activities, using the school as a front to conduct his operations. He had been meeting with known criminals and using his position to cover his tracks. Mr. Anderson was arrested and charged with several crimes, including drug trafficking and conspiracy. It was a shock to everyone at Valley High School. The news spread quickly, and the school held assemblies to address the situation and reassure students and parents. The arrest left us all feeling betrayed and confused. Counseling was offered to students, and the school implemented stricter security measures. I struggled with the fact that someone I admired had such a dark secret.